Hello, everyone. This morning I watched a little of Louder with Crowder without Dave Landau, which is not nearly as good as with Dave Landau, but whatever. I don't need a long preamble to this video, so I'll just say I stopped watching when Crowder began going off on how Lindsey Graham wanted to cause World War III because he supported Ukraine. And that's the issue I want to delve into on this video. It's not so much Crowder's idiotic take, and it is idiotic, don't get me wrong. Crowder demonstrates by what he says that not only does he not have a clue what's going on in Ukraine or Russia, but that he doesn't care either. And that's his prerogative. He can be ignorant all he wants, but when you're ignorant about something and you confidently express your viewpoint anyway, those who understand what's going on, those who know what's going on, they just find that you're only a windbag with no substance. And sadly, that is what Crowder has proven himself to be now. For all his talk about change my mind, he's got no there, as the expression goes. There's nothing there to change. He didn't reason himself into this point of view. There's no reason to get him out of it. But again, my response here, this video is not about Crowder specifically. He just introduced the topic because, well, he clearly doesn't know any of what I'm about to talk about because it takes at least 15 seconds of research to find out. He's just spouting Russian propaganda points. That's all he's doing. And the irony is, of course, he pretends that he's got a neutral stance on this issue. Yes, somehow repeating the exact phrases that Russian propaganda is speaking means you're neutral. It doesn't mean you're pro-Russian. No. Because, yeah, he thinks he's neutral because he believes that Russia and Ukraine is just two pieces of crap fighting it out. That's basically what he said. But okay, anyway, I said this isn't about Crowder. Let me just give a little bit of historical context here. If you're concerned about World War III, this will not escalate into World War III. You know how I know? Because the United States is actually involved. The United States is invested in this. Think historically for a minute. Every single world war that has ever happened in the entire history of the world began with the United States specifically declaring their desire to remain isolationist and out of the conflict. Now, because I know how logic works, I'm going to be the first to point out that this is a small sample size. There have only been 2 world wars, and there are almost certainly other factors of much greater importance involved in this, not just the United States' isolation, but it is still a legitimate fact that the United States policy at the beginning of every single world war that has ever happened has been complete isolationism. And that when the US has gotten involved in foreign conflicts, exactly none of them have escalated into a world war. And that's even when we fought a proxy war with China in Korea and basically a proxy war with the USSR in Vietnam. None of those rose to the level of a world war. Why? Because the United States is a formidable adversary in warfare. China doesn't want to fight the US openly. Russia certainly doesn't want to fight the US openly. Hell, Russia can't even take Bakhmut right now, and it's expending nearly the entirety of its defense budget for getting a couple of meters over half of a year. It's losing 700 soldiers KIA per day in the process. They've lost more dead in 1 year of fighting Ukraine than in every single war that they have fought since World War II combined. And they're fighting a Ukraine that does not have Western tanks or Western air power. If the US got involved, Russia would fold immediately. That's objectively true. The only thing they have at all is a nuclear arsenal left over from the 80s that might not blow up on the launch pad if they tried to use it. That's the only deterrent they have. Yet, while that keeps US troops from entering into Russian land, it doesn't stop this cat from deciding that he's going to climb on me. Give me 1 second here. So as I was saying, while the nuclear threat does keep US troops from entering Russian lands, Russia knows they cannot win a nuclear war either. They would get obliterated if they use nukes, because the US would respond with nukes. Russia cannot defeat the US militarily. They cannot use their nuclear arsenal without mutual assured destruction, and they cannot risk anything else economically. So Russia can bluster all at once, and their propagandists can say whatever they want on TV to make themselves feel strong and powerful like Russian bear. But the reality is that everyone knows Russia cannot fight the US on any front, economic, military, or even culturally. Their only hope is to keep the US as uninvolved as possible. Now, this is the exact same tactic that Hitler understood in World War II. His own document showed that his main goal was to ensure the US would not enter the war and help England. If you read the papers captured from the German High Command after World War II, you'll see that Hitler didn't want to conquer all of Europe. That was never his aim. I mean, there's the myth that the US likes to profligate to England, that England would all be speaking German if it wasn't for us. But the truth is that Hitler didn't want to take over England. He actually just wanted England to cease fire, to peace out of the war, so that Germany could do whatever they wanted on the mainland continent. They just wanted to do what they wanted there. They didn't want to take over England. But they knew that in order to get England to peace out of the war, they needed to make sure the US didn't provide enough support. So he worked to maintain the US's neutrality as much as he could. The isolationism of the United States at that time emboldened Hitler to take actions in Europe because it was one less adversary for him to have to plan against. And it wasn't until Japan attacked that the US even entered the war. And it should be noted that the Japanese attack of Pearl Harbor came as a surprise to Germany. They hadn't expected it, and Hitler hadn't wanted it. He just wanted Japan to be threatening in the Pacific to keep the US interests out of Europe and focused on the Pacific. But when Japan did attack, Hitler decided to fulfill the treaty that he had signed with Japan and declared war as well. He promised he would, and for whatever reason, this time he decided he would keep his promise. Anyway, historical lesson aside, the point is this. The world, right now, doesn't want to fight the US because they know even if they win that war, it will cost a lot to defeat the US. United States isolationism, therefore, is the desire of every single tin pot dictator worldwide. They want to make the US not look their way. See, Russia believed that they could take Kyiv in 3 days, 2 weeks max, and that the US would not be able to do anything about it because of how quick the war happened. That was their fundamental miscalculation, although it's not really fair to say it was their miscalculation. Everyone thought that that was going to happen, including the US. But when Ukraine held on, Russia found itself in a quagmire. Now, it talks about escalating. It makes claims about World War III. It threatens nukes because it has no other options. Russians know if the US enters this war, it's over for them. The only thing they can do is hope to threaten enough people into making the US too timid to engage. It's like the barking of a dog who's trapped in a corner who knows he cannot win, but he has to make his last stand. Those who fear that Russia might use nukes in this, Russian generals are not suicidal. With the arrest warrant of Putin now handed out from the ICC, the International Criminal Court, these generals actually have an option. If Putin says launch nuke, they can choose, do I launch the nuke and then die in the hellfire return of all the other nukes, or it was all Putin's fault. We can end the war right now. We'll just push him over, let him get arrested and hanged. End of story. The generals know they have an option. They don't have to hit the button that will ensure their own death. And they're not suicidal. They will instead get rid of Putin. And there's a means to do it that saves them face. So Russia, and specifically Putin, has no leverage now. Their threats are nothing but threats. They're just words. They have no ability to do anything. Yet, conservatives in America play right into the only tactic that Russia has, those words. They swallow the Russian propaganda completely and then regurgitate it out as if it's their own thoughts. They claim that Ukraine is corrupt. Oh, sure. People like Crowder will admit, well, Russia's bad too. But think of the corruption. Think of the corruption of Ukraine. Corruption. Look, my family has been in Ukraine since 1998. I have heard firsthand stories about what the corruption was like in Ukraine back then. I've heard from Ukrainians today about the current status of the government. I think Washington, D.C. is more corrupt than Kyiv is, if you want to get down to brass tacks. But all of that is irrelevant. You know why? Because I would take a million corrupt governments in the exact same manner which Ukraine is corrupt over a single corrupt Russian government with their type of corruption. See, Ukraine isn't going around raping, torturing, executing POWs. Ukraine oppositions don't get the exam question of, can you fly out of this 15-story building? It's kind of a pass-fail. No, that's not what Ukrainian corruption is. It's Ukrainian corruption. It exists, but it is decidedly westernized corruption. It's the same corruption you see in Germany, France, and yes, the Biden administration. Russian corruption, on the other hand, is far more insidious. It's the type of corruption you see in the mafia, in Yakuza, in the drug cartels out of Mexico. Give me a million Western corrupted governments any day over one of those types of corrupted ruling classes. There's no choice in this. This is hands down a dumb switch to go between. But what about America first? The anti-Ukraine right likes to shout out, there goes another $100 million for Ukraine. What about our homeless vets? Well, yes, what about our homeless vets, right-wingers? What are you doing about it? Nothing? Well, then the homeless vets are just a word that you're using. You don't care about them. They're a prop for you to use in an argument. You say America first while ignoring that America already does have more wealth than 98% of the world. That's right. If you look it up, our poverty line, the line in which you are officially in poverty in the United States, if you don't make this much, that poverty line is more than 98% of the entire world earns per year. That's our poverty line. And so leftists, don't think you're off the hook on this either. You claim to be against the 1%. Bitch, you are the 1%. Every single American is. And don't get me started on the religious aspects of this. We have to provide for our family first. God wills it. Yes, and is your family starving? If we give $100 million of ammunition, of Stinger missiles, of anti-air defense to Ukraine, does that mean that you go without a meal? Does it mean you pay an extra 2 cents on your caramel latte? Meanwhile, us giving an air defense system to Ukraine means that a missile that would have destroyed an apartment complex and killed 3 children and 12 innocent civilians instead gets blown out of the sky and kills no one. I'll pay an extra $50 for my coffee for that exchange. Because no matter how much you bitch and moan about America first, and we all know you really mean America only, it will not change the fact that you already do have everything you need. Even the poorest American is obese for the love. And again, if you actually cared about the people you trot out for your examples of who the government should spend money on instead, people who, I might point out, you don't actually want the government to spend any money on because you constantly say government should not be giving out any handouts, you don't lift a single finger to help them out in your personal life. You simply don't, because you don't care about them. And that speaks a lot more about your soul than it does about anything you're saying about Ukraine.